Hello and welcome to Addicted to Lacrosse. This is Season 2, Episode 12. Today is Monday, March the 16th, 2015. My name is Graham Perro. With me today is Tyler Fitch. Melissa Daphne, unfortunately, is not able to join us tonight, so it's just me and Tyler. Q&A app is running on our Google Plus page, so head on over there and ask some questions if you like. We're also on Twitter at Lax Podcast, so you can send us some tweets during the show, and we will respond to them as we go. Bunch of games this weekend. Pretty busy weekend in the NLL. But first, we have some news, which seems kind of unusual this year. They haven't had an awful lot. But we had a trade last week. Not that it was a total surprise. We kind of knew it was coming. It was just a question of when and who. But Jeremy Noble was finally sent from the Nighthawks to the Colorado Mammoth. Noble, in case you have forgotten, was the second overall draft pick last year's draft by the Nighthawks. He's a Denver guy, so he lives in Denver, goes to university there, or I think he did. I'm pretty sure he's done now. But he still lives in Denver, and he decided that he would not be able to report to the Nighthawks. And I don't know if he told them that before the draft or after, but either way, they drafted him. He has not played a game yet, and Colorado was kind of the assumed destination because he lived in Denver. So the trade was Jeremy Noble and a third-round pick in this year's draft, sent to Colorado. Going back to the Nighthawks, our first-round picks in 2016 and 2017, as well as a third-round pick this year. So this looks like a pretty good return for a guy who had really no plans to play in Rochester, and Rochester basically got him for free through the draft. So works out really well for Rochester. They're setting themselves up for first-round picks in the next two drafts, and I believe not the next one, but the two after that. And from what I'm told, the next draft or two are supposed to be pretty deep, so they might get some pretty darn good players out of that. At the same time, Colorado gets, I want to say proven, because he's played exactly one game in the NLL now. But I mean, everybody knew he was going to be a solid offensive star in the leagues, and the one game so far has shown that. So it's pretty much a win-win for both teams. In fact, you might even call it a win-win-win, because to make room for Jeremy Noble, Colorado had to release somebody, and they decided to release Sean Pollock, who was then signed by the Calgary Roughnecks just today. I think that's a great pickup for the Roughnecks, who have obviously been struggling this year. So, I mean, he's not John Grant, he's not Dane Doby, but he puts in a lot of points. He's got 12-odd seasons in the league, so he's got some leadership skills. He's a veteran. He's been around a long time. So I think that could really help the Roughnecks out.
Yeah, I was wondering if he's kind of coming in maybe to fill a void from Scott Ranger leaving, that they realize there's a large void to fill. Something along those lines, I'm not sure.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Or Curtis Dixon did score 0 goals last weekend, so maybe they're just looking for the next big thing.
In fact, a whole bunch of people scored 0 goals. We'll get to that game later, but where did I write it? Dixon had nothing. Doby had nothing. Shatler had nothing. Obviously, that didn't help the Roughnecks. But even on the Rochester side, they scored 13 goals, and Dan Dawson had 0, and Cody Jameson had 0. So a whole lot of zeros on people that you don't expect to see zeros next to. In fact, Dixon didn't have any points at all. He didn't even have an assist. Melissa did mention... Sorry?
Cut that guy.
That may be a little extreme, but I'm sure they've got him on a watch list. Melissa did mention leave a comment about the deal. She didn't mention anything about Noble, but she did say that she doesn't like them letting Pollock go. She says he had a lot of impact on the floor, was a fan favorite, and seemed like a team motivator as well. I think long-term his veteran leadership and offensive skills will be missed. Well, if Noble can replace the offensive skills, that part certainly will be made up. And if he works out as well as he did in that one game, becoming a fan favorite should be pretty easy. But the veteran leadership is certainly something that a first-year player can't really replace. Um, so good luck to Sean Pollock in Calgary. I think that that might be a pretty good deal for Calgary, and it's really not a bad deal to trade overall for both Rochester and Colorado.
I thought it was pretty amusing that they traded third rounders in the 2015 draft. Like, that matters almost. By the time you get that halfway through the draft, the guys are really going to be kind of like geographically based or whatever. Like, you know who you're taking at that spot compared to like a first rounder.
Yeah, the addition of the third rounders in there does seem a little odd. I mean, it's like any trade you see where you're trading somebody for a fourth or fifth or sixth round pick. It's basically give me something in return. But yeah, once you're beyond even the second round, it's quite a bit of a crapshoot, and so swapping picks in that round seems a little weird. All right, let's get on to the games. Looks like I'm going to be talking for a while because I was at the first two that we were going to talk about. So I need to give a big shout out here to both Steve Bermel, who works for the Bandits, and Kevin Kennedy, who also works for the Bandits. I called Steve up on, I don't know, Wednesday or Tuesday or something, saying I wanted to go to the game in Buffalo on Friday, and can you get me tickets? And he's done this for me in the past. He's a season ticket holder, so he uses his discount, and then I don't have to pay the Ticketmaster charges and all that kind of thing. So I sent him a text just saying, can you get me a couple tickets? And turns out that Kevin Kennedy, who's the Bandits' anthem singer, wasn't able to use the tickets that he gets for every game. So he said, hey, give these to Graham. Now, honestly, I don't know if it was give these to Graham or if it was give these to some fan who's looking for them. But either way, we got his tickets, didn't have to pay for them. We were literally right behind the Rock bench. It was technically row 3, but it was the first row right behind the bench. That was probably the closest I've ever been to any sporting event, with the possible exception of a Blue Jays game that I went to in spring training once, where I was sat next to the guy with the radar gun. Now, so obviously being right up close was really great. We got to watch the practice. You could not quite hear everything on the bench. The glass is thicker than you would expect, so we didn't really hear much. But my son got to high five all the players as they were going on and off the field, and the Rock trainer guy came out and gave us a couple of lacrosse balls after the shoot around and this kind of thing. So that kind of stuff was pretty cool. The downside of that was lacrosse players and coaches tend to be really tall, and they're standing up right in front of you, and they don't sit down during the game. So basically, once the game started, I couldn't see anything. So we got to watch.
That's exactly what I was going to ask. I went to one game where I sat right behind the bench, and that was it. That was the one game I didn't. I learned that I like my other seat options better.
Yeah, that's exactly what we found. The play that was happening at the other end of the floor was just not. We couldn't possibly see anything, so we watched that on the jumbotron. The play that was happening at our end wasn't too bad. We could kind of see around people, and I was doing a lot of this to try and get around Dan Lattiser. And of course, Dan Lattiser is 6'6", so trying to get around him was challenging. But so I honestly didn't get that great of a feel for the game. Like I couldn't come out of that game and say, well, this guy played well, this guy didn't play so well. I don't remember seeing this guy at all. The offense was good, the defense was bad, whatever it was. I didn't really get a good sense of what happened in that game. So I know it was on TV. I don't know if you managed to see any of it, Tyler?
No, I was at a conference this weekend, Friday and Saturday, so I barely got to watch games.
All right. So I did make a few notes. I thought like the Rock offense was down near me for the first quarter, so I got to see. I think it was the second quarter actually. I got to see a lot of the Rock passing in the offensive zone, and the ball movement looked kind of suspect. It looked like they certainly weren't taking full advantage of the shot clock. It looked like they were passing around for a while and then shooting, more often than not hitting Cosmo square in the chest, and they still had 7, 8, 10 seconds left on the shot clock when they shot. So if you're going to shoot and hit the guy in the chest, that better be a desperation shot with a second left. If you've still got 7 seconds and the best shot you can get is hit him in the chest, well, then you should be passing to somebody else. Somebody else has got to have a better shot than that, at least now and again, anyway. But um, that seemed better in the third quarter, and then it kind of vanished again in the fourth as the Bandits completed their comeback. I didn't actually mention the score. Bandits won that game 15-12, for those of you who did not manage to see it. Nick Rose wasn't too bad. He made a few outstanding saves and a few that weren't, I guess, that he didn't make. Cosmo was really good. He had a great night. He also had 5 assists on the night, and I think the NLL tweeted that was the first time that a goalie had ever had 5 assists and 50 saves in the same night. So good job, Cosmo, and I guess that tells you how good the Bandits' transition was on the night.
He was happy to be back and playing, I guess.
Definitely, after having missed, I guess he only missed one game with the snow shoveling injury. Interesting part of this game was at the very end it was the game was kind of chippy all the way through, and there was lots of penalties. And then right at the end, like I said, I was close enough to the bench that I couldn't actually see what happened. I did see at one point near the very end, Brody Merrill came back to the bench, and he was just livid about something. I didn't hear what it was, but he came into the bench and, with his glove on, luckily, punched the wooden wall of the bench 3 times. Just punched it as hard as he could. And John Lovell kind of came by and just kind of put his hand on his back just to calm him down a little. And then I think it was his very next shift when he got out there and fought with Steve Priolo and got his butt kicked. So he was really unhappy about something. This was, I think, after Troy Cordingley had to be physically restrained on the Bandits bench from running out and tackling, presumably John Lovell. I think it was Lovell that he was yelling at some point. And then there were a couple of other fights, and people got ejected, and so yeah, it kind of got silly. It didn't quite get completely out of hand, but it looked like it was getting close. And then the game ended. The Bandits won, and I at the end of the game, I remember thinking, this looks kind of like one of those old Bandits games, and not even that old, where at the end of the game, they're losing the game, they realize they're not going to come back and win it, so let's just start some fights because we're all pissed off. Except that they weren't losing, they were winning. Now, like I said, I was close enough that I couldn't actually tell. Maybe it was the Rock getting PO'd, and they were the one that started all the fights. But anyway, they went to the game ended, they went to the handshake line, and I was half expecting something to start in the handshake line, but that seemed to go okay until Patrick Merrill, who was the first in line on the Rock, got to the end of the Bandits line, which is where the coaches are, and after shaking Troy Cordingley's hand, he started walking toward the Rock bench, to get to the dressing room, and Cordingley came with him, and they were yelling. I don't think Merrill was saying anything, but Cordingley was just yelling and screaming, basically "F you" the whole time. He said it 3 or 4 or 5 times, to the point where other Bandits had to pull him away from the whole line, and they just, I think the rest of the team went through the line. I don't think Cordingley did. He was just pulled off, and they left the floor. So that's the way that game ended.
Not the most gracious winner I've seen.
Not exactly, no. It does seem funny that the Bandits would cut their ties with Darius Kilgore and then hire Troy Cordingley, who's kind of, I don't want to say the same guy, but he's certainly just as fired up as Kilgore ever was. And so they played together, they've coached together, I can't say much about their actual coaching style, but they're both screamers, we know that, and they're both passionate, and maybe they need to just calm things down a little bit sometimes.
Yeah, but I bet you were then excited for what was going to happen the next night after all that. the way that ended, huh?
I do have to say I was looking forward to the Saturday night game, um, partially because I was going to be able to actually see the rest of the game. So my seats are about halfway, like right on halfway up the floor. About we're 17 rows back, so I get a good view of the whole floor. I can see everything. So I really like my season seats there. Um, the first half of the Saturday night game looked like it was going to be a repeat of the Friday night game, and I believe there was a fight in the first quarter. Actually, Patrick Merrill got a 5-minute major for roughing in the first quarter, and then he got in a fight either later in the quarter or possibly in the second. Can't remember which. Um, so he was ejected from the game before the game was half over because he had 2 majors in the same game. And yeah, there it is. 3 minutes into the second quarter, he's tossed from the game. And so it looked like this was going to just boil over at some point, and the whole benches were going to clear, and it was going to be insane. It didn't happen. It kind of kept going. At one point, Billy Hostrauser from The Rock and Steve Priolo from the Bandits started kind of pushing and shoving each other. And almost like you were expecting them to drop the mitts because that's what they do. Those are the two of the fighter guys, but it didn't happen. They each got roughing penalties, and I didn't really see why because nothing happened. But it was almost like the refs expected something to happen, so they gave them the penalty anyway. But anyway, whatever happened at halftime, both coaches talked to their teams. I don't know if they were warned by the refs to say, hey, this better not get any worse. But the second half of the game was totally different. There were 2 penalties in the whole second half. One was a too many men, and one was a Jeff Gilbert holding stick. No roughing, no fighting, no anything. It turned out to be a really, really good game. Both goalies played really well. Brandon Miller was outstanding. Cosmo was also outstanding. Again, the Rock were hitting Cosmo in the chest. You don't want to do that. The ball is not going to go in when you hit him in the chest.
Cosmo's like the best guy, also at slightly angling down, so everything in the chest just drops to his feet. There's no rebounds. If you're gonna hit anybody in the chest, don't hit him in the chest.
That's I guess that's been one of my complaints about Nick Rose, and I'd say he's better this year, but for sure last year he was big on giving up the rebounds. He'd come in and make some amazing stop, and then just give up this great big juicy rebound. And now and again it came back to bite him. It wasn't too bad really, but certainly more rebounds from Rose than from Miller or from what I was used to for the previous 10 years with Watson. He wasn't a rebound kind of guy at all. So then we get to the handshake line of the second game, and this is, of course, after the Rock had won it in overtime. I was watching this one especially to see what Troy Cordingley would do, and nothing. For the beginning, anyway. He went through the whole line, shook everybody's hand, didn't look like he was saying anything, but that's fine. No big deal. Got to the end, shook John Lovell's hand. It looked to me like he shook John Lovell's hand, just kind of said, hey, it was a good game. Turned, shook Dan Ladouceur's hand. I think he kind of patted him on the chest as well. And shortly after that, 2 of the refs came running over to where he and Lovell were. Nothing ever happened. Like, they didn't have to go in and break anything up. But it was confusing why the refs ran over at that point. So I don't know if something was said that made them think something's going to happen, or they just saw them together and said, uh-oh, remember last night, and went over to try and stop something before it started. Don't know what happened, but it looked like something was going to happen, and nothing ever did. Yeah, so one other comment about the second game, the Toronto attendance for that game, now it was Buffalo coming in on a Saturday night, so that's usually pretty good. Over 11,000. So, I mean, we talked about the last Rock home game, which only had 7,000, which was down about that 4,000 from 2 or 3 weeks before. And looks like they got all those 4,000 back. So I don't know if there was some weird thing happening in Toronto that night that I don't remember about. But it was nice to see the attendance back up where it has been for the last few years anyway, back in the 11K range. Did you happen to see Saturday night's game?
I did not. got the stealth game stuff, but not anything before that. Like this was on the wrong time zone for me.
All right. Okay, I guess we will move on to the next game, which I didn't see either. Um, I haven't even seen any highlights of this, so I don't really have much to say. This was New England over Minnesota. Um, this looked like they were missing a few people. Kevin Buchanan didn't play for New England. Callum Crawford didn't play either game on the weekend for Minnesota, and Logan Schuss was out for the Friday or the Saturday night game, though he did return for the Sunday game. And you mentioned in your comments Suter versus O'Brien, and I didn't see this one, which somebody tweeted the other day that was a little interesting. That the first O'Brien fight got like millions of views, maybe not millions, but certainly thousands of views on YouTube, and the league and a whole bunch of people were promoting it like crazy because he beat the snot out of Stephen Keogh, and now we can't find video of this one at all. So that seemed a little weird. Maybe it was more of a fair fight, but I didn't actually see it. Did you see any of it?
No, I didn't see the game. The fight, I did find video of it. It was 10 seconds in. It was like opening draw, and ball came out, and by the time somebody scooped it up, whistles were blowing, and those two were squaring off. It was a pretty fair fight. Good Suter action. He always goes for the big guys when he needs to. And I'd argue that O'Brien won, but it really was his size was the advantage. Suter kept trying to come at him, and he'd get shots in, and O'Brien was just like, all right, little guy, hit me. Let's keep going. Into the game action, I wasn't able to see any of this. Callum Crawford is at least the second, or maybe because of a bye week, the third week he's been out. So he's definitely got something going on where he's missing time, and it's hurting the Swarm a lot. Logan Schuss being out kind of makes a farce of the NLL transaction rules. He went from on Saturday during the game, he was placed on the short-term holdout list. He can't make it. It's impossible. He can't be in Minnesota, and then the next day he's in Colorado and playing off the short-term holdout list. So it's just like, we've got your rights. We'll use you when we can, and we'll do whatever we. The league basically lets guys go. It's like, if you can make it, that's great. If not, we'll let you have a player on your roster for free by using the short-term holdout list. Which makes you wonder, how bad was Brody McDonald's situation that they didn't do this for the one game they needed him on a goalie on the bench? I don't get it. Minnesota battled hard and only lost by one, but my pick was right. I had New England winning that game, so I feel good about it. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, it's kind of been a tough season for the Swarm. Not only are I mean they're kind of up and down. They had a couple of good games earlier on in the season, if I remember correctly. But now they've missed Crawford for the last 3 games. They've missed Schuss for Saturday night, and I think he missed 1 or 2 others as well. Though it sounded like he was going to miss the whole season, so I guess anything they get from him is gravy. And then Kyle Matisse was out on Sunday as well, so they're just having, I don't know, people are just dropping like flies around Minnesota. And then, of course, with the whole goalie situation, that does seem like it really could have been better handled by the Swarm management, and we've still heard no real explanation as to what happened there, why they didn't know. Oh, what I heard was they didn't know that his wife was pregnant. So, who doesn't tell their employer when that kind of thing happens? I don't get that. But anyway.
Youngins.
Yeah, I suppose.
He's only like 23, 24, I think, so he learned a life lesson.
Yeah, so speaking of life lessons, it looks like the Stealth might have learned a couple on Saturday. Edmonton 19, Vancouver 7. Ouch. I did not see this game. This was on at the same time as the second Rock game, but I'm assuming you tried to watch this one, did you?
Yeah, I wish I had not. Edmonton jumped out to an early 3-0 lead, and I was like, oh, come on. And I remember, hey, just a week ago, Edmonton had a 3-0 lead and lost the game to the Roughnecks. So I was totally optimistic, like, all right, they started strong, whatever, that's fine. The Stealth can rally. And then I started watching the gameplay, and there was never going to be a rally. There was nothing going great for the Stealth in this game, and it was a total bummer. They came in tied for first place. They're both 4-4, I think, and the winner would have first place. And the Stealth seemed like they were unaware of the situation. They took 35 shots total, like not even in a half or like on and off cage combined or anything. Just 35 shots on cage, I think. And I can't remember ever seeing a shot total that low. The offense that had been great, it's totally sputtering for the Stealth. I think the rush match up really well against the Stealth and dominated and asserted themselves in the way that they can and frequently did last year. So that's a good omen for the Rush fans that their team is coming back together. You had a couple notes here. What do you think, Graham?
It was interesting that when I saw the score of the game and then the like tweets and people talking about it, the first thing they mentioned was that Garrison and Burton were both out, and I started to wonder what it is about the Stealth that they lose a couple of players and they're a completely different team. First, it was Rory Smith and O'Doherty were both out with injuries, and the team was just couldn't handle losing those two guys. Then they came back and played great. And this game, Garrison and Burton are out and they play terrible again. And I get that some teams can handle that better than other teams, but then it makes me wonder why. Is that, I mean, when you look at, I mean, maybe the Rock's a bad example, but they lose Garrett Billings and Colin Doyle, and suddenly they're the best offensive team in the league, which nobody saw coming. Is that a coaching thing? Is that me underestimating how important these guys are? Yeah, I honestly don't know the answer. Do you know?
I don't have a clear answer. I think it's a player and a roster thing, not a coaching thing. That I think every system is kind of built around the roster as a whole, and everybody needs to know their role. And if somebody's not there, the players need to step up and get in there and do the needful. The Stealth, I don't really consider them injury ridden, but it's also kind of everybody thinks offense when you think of key injuries. But it's really the defense. They're not having a consistent lineup, and like you said, the best possible lineup on the floor, and they win games. The not best lineup on the floor, and they're not, and it's a bummer. I can't. I had no idea that Edmonton could just dominate this way, or the Stealth could. I don't know. Not that they laid down, but it's like you had a chance to play for first. I tweeted after the game that they had a chance to play for first, and they went from being tied for first, and then following the Colorado win, ends up with third in the West, all by themselves. And it was kind of a bummer. I just stated as a fact, like they were tied for first, and now they're in third. And like I don't know, Doug Locker got on my case, the GM for the Stealth, and I thought that was a little touchy. You got to be able to have people think. He said, like, I'm jumping off the ship. I've been through too many lean Stealth teams to be jumping off the ship. I'm just stating a fact that the team was tied for first, and now it's in third. I mean, am I wrong? No. But if when you're part of the pro organization, like Lewis Ratcliffe does to me in the past too, they just get really touchy, and then they actually come at you, and you're like, nah, you can't do that. You have to let it go. You just better to say nothing. It's kind of inappropriate. I thought the Stealth were doing like a home and home with these guys, but I don't know who they play next week. No, they don't.
Colorado.
No, we have Vancouver at Edmonton. That was last weekend. Yeah, Colorado. So Colorado maybe doing home and home. So I thought this was the first game of a home and home, so they could really kind of brush it off and come back and show that it was a fluke. But no, they just have to stew on it, go play Colorado a little bit, and then hopefully they'll get another shot at the rush and show up. Okay, that's my thoughts on that game. I don't really want to. I talked about it a lot,
All
but I
right.
don't want to.
Let's get away from that topic then.
Let's forget that one.
This one should cheer you up a little bit. Rochester 13, Calgary 7. Again, I didn't see this one either. We mentioned earlier that Dixon, Doby, Schattler, Dan Dawson, and Cody Jamieson combined for 0 goals. I'm looking at here. Paul Dawson got 1. So Paul Dawson got more goals than all those 5 people combined. And in fact, if you get all those, I guess Jamieson and Dawson had 2 assists each. Schattler and Doby had 2 assists each. Dixon had nothing. So that's 2, 4, 6, 8 points between the 5 of them, and Anthony Cosmo had 5 assists. So there's some fun with numbers for you. So Rochester got scoring from the returning Aaron Wilson, a couple goals from him, a couple from Craig Point, 3 from Jordan Hall, 2 from Joe Walters, and then singles from Dawson, Brad Self, Ian Lord, and Sid Smith. Hey, let me check that again. Sid Smith.
He only scored
That
like
would
his
be
first NHL goal earlier this year or last year.
I think it was last year, it looks like, because he's got 1 this year. Let's see what he did last year. Sid Smith, 1 goal and 3 assists last year.
So he's got 2 for his career, is my guess.
So how often can you say that on the same night Sid Smith outscored Cody Jamieson and Anthony Cosmo outscored John Tavares? Yeah, odd game from the sounds of things. I kind of wish I had seen it. Matt Vince with 85% save percentage and only 7 goals allowed, not bad. Mike Poulin played most of this one, it looks like, and Chiliano came in for 13 minutes or so. Yeah, I mean, all I've got is the stats. I didn't see any of the game. I didn't see any of the highlights or anything. Did you see this one at all?
No, but I was kind of digging into where you said Chiliano came in, and he came in the first, or he started and then Poulin came in, because Poulin finished the game. But the Roughnecks only gave Roughnecks only gave up 1 goal in the first, and they still pulled the goalie, or switched goalies for 13 minutes. That's weird.
That is weird.
And there was 28 saves between the 2 goalies in the first quarter. No, wait, that's total. Never mind. Now I see that. 5-10. No, sorry. See, I read it totally backwards. Silly site. Chiliano came in the 4th when the game was out of hand. I had it backwards. Yeah, so Poulin let in 2 quick ones, a minute and a half into the 4th, and he was done for the night. Sean Evans responded and was like, "Oh, a goalie's out. I'll get a couple goals." But he kind of had a good game for everybody else, but a poor game for him with 4 points. But he's been averaging about 8 a game all season. So half his usual production. No penalties in this game. 5 total. 1 power play goal. Kind of just let him run. Yeah, but exactly what I thought. I thought Calgary after Rochester after beating these Roughnecks a couple weeks ago would go up to Calgary and do it this time, and I was right. So yay, pick them.
You did have a good week. We will get to that right after the final game, which I didn't see this one either. This was on ESPN in the U.S. and I can't get that, and it was only on TSN Go in Canada, and I can't get that because my cable provider doesn't support it yet. So this one I had no chance of watching at all. this was the debut of Jeremy Noble, as we talked about earlier, who scored 7 points in his debut. Not bad. Somebody asked on Twitter what the highest point total for a debut game was, and the NLL stats account went back to 1990. Some loser named Paul Gate scored 7 goals and 2 assists in his NLL debut. So I guess the take-home message is be a twin.
Yeah.
That seemed to work.
Yeah, well played. Well played. Twinsies.
Yep. So Schuss was back in this game, but again, Callum Crawford was out for his third straight, and Kyle Matisse was also out, as we mentioned before. Yeah, it looks like you watched this one, Tyler.
Yeah, ESPN app on the Apple TV. I was able to have it up on the big screen nice and easily, but it's kind of during dinner time, so I had family stuff to conflict. Great game for the Mammoth. I think they could kind of show that they were in the battle. Their offense could work well. They adjusted to the new player. They had a lot of moving pieces there to drop Pollock after a few years and bring in Noble, and he was game ready, and the offense seemed to flow with him very well. Not just his couple goals, but 5 assists, which means he was setting people up. I was kind of watching that after he had, I think, 4 early on. He had 6 points on the first 8 goals for the Mammoth, and he missed at least one where he was the third pass, because it went pass, and then a goal. So he would have been he's just off by 1. Very good ball movement for the Mammoth in this game. They were wearing their Shamrock jerseys because tomorrow or Tuesday is the St. Patrick's Day. And I was trying to figure out if there's any way at all. Every single player's name was O, and then O apostrophe the last name. So it was O Noble, O Grant, O Gallant. I was trying to figure out if there's any way at all that's insensitive, or do Irish people not care? I'm just not sure.
Yeah, I can't answer that other than I'm of Scottish descent, and if there were some sort of Scottish day where everybody was Mick something, me personally, I wouldn't have any problem with that. But then again, I was born in Canada. I'm not. I have a Scottish descent. My parents are Scottish. Maybe people who actually were Scottish, or in this case Irish, might have an opinion on that, but I certainly haven't seen any negative comments about that.
No, I think they really haven't seen a lot of Irish suffering, so they're fine with their name being used.
Though try to call somebody Patty, Patty, on Tuesday, and you will get yelled at from all over the place. I found that last year it is actually Paddy, Paddy, and for some reason last year seemed to be everybody and their brother saying this, hey, make sure you say Paddy and not Patty. And I don't know why it was such a big deal last year, and it wasn't for the previous 40 whatever St. Patrick's days of my life, but maybe that's what social media does.
Maybe there's some unknown Irish calendar like the Chinese calendar. So was the year of the dragon or the year of the Paddy? We'll see what this year's the year of the Sean. I'm trying too hard, aren't I?
Okay, we'll move on to our predictions. Yeah, we won't mention the Vancouver game, so this will cheer you up as well. There are all kinds of things to cheer you up after that Vancouver thing. You were 5-1 last week, so nice job. But all 3 of us had pretty good weeks. Melissa and I were both 4-2, so not bad. I missed actually all of us missed the Toronto Buffalo game on Friday night. You got all the rest right. And then I called Calgary in the Calgary-Rochester game. And Melissa called for a Minnesota win over New England, which didn't happen.
I was totally going to tweet at you Saturday night and be like, dang it, Graham, why did you pick Edmonton to win? Why did you pick the Stealth to lose? Because then you can't win either way yourself, right?
Nope. No, I've been yelled at enough times for picking Vancouver to win that I'm just checking my pick for this week to make sure I didn't pick Vancouver again or I get yelled at. So overall, you and I are now tied at 22 and 23, and Melissa is, I guess, a half game ahead of us at 23 and 22. So we're right around the 500 mark, and all three of us are almost tied, so not too bad. This weekend's games. There's only 4 this week. I guess there were 7 last week, or 6, 7. Anyway, less. Let me see if I can do the math. I was 4-2, so that would make it 6 games, wouldn't it? This week there's only 4. It looks like all of us. Oh no, me and Melissa picked almost the same things. In fact, we did pick the same things, and you were way off. So one of us, or possibly 2 of us, are going to be quite a ways ahead next week. I guess I'll start, and I'll go with Melissa's as well, because like I said, hers are the same as mine. New England and Calgary. I went with Calgary on this one. New England won last week, and Calgary lost. But New England beat a kind of a depleted Minnesota team and didn't actually win by much. Calgary has got they've got a win or 2 now. They did lose to the Nighthawks, but it looked like basically a bad game from everybody. And I guess I'm kind of assuming that Calgary's just going to be pissed about everything from here on to the end of the season, and proving to themselves and proving to everybody else that they are not really a 2-8 team or 2-7 team or whatever they are now. I think New England will be the first victims of that. Edmonton, Toronto. I hate picking against my Toronto Rock, but honestly, the Rock have. I mean, obviously they're 10-2. They're first in the league. They're playing very, very well, but they haven't dominated the games, or at least most of them. Certainly not the way that Edmonton has in the last few games. One of the NLL fact of the days for this week, which I ran into yesterday, was Edmonton's winning differential in games that they have won is like 7.5 or 7.8 or something like this. So when they win, they're winning by a ton. Their losing differential in games that they've lost is about 1.5, which is the lowest in the league. So the games that they're winning by a lot. The games that are losing, they're not losing by much. Toronto's are I think second in winning differential, but down at around 4.5. And I mean, they've only lost 2, so it's kind of hard to judge their losing differential. But I think Edmonton's clicking, and I can see them coming in and taking it to the Rock. So I'm going to go with Edmonton on that one. And Melissa said this was a toss-up, and she went for Edmonton as well. Minnesota at Buffalo. If the Swarm have Callum Crawford back and all their other scoring people back, then this will be a much closer game. But I'm going to go for the Bandits on that one. And Colorado, Vancouver. I'm not allowed to pick Vancouver, so I went with Colorado. I think adding Jeremy Noble is going to be a big thing for the Mammoth. He looked. I mean, I didn't see the game, but it sounded like he was really clicking with the Mammoth offense, and that's going to help. Vancouver has been a total Jekyll and Hyde team this year. Either they play really well or they really stink up the joint. I don't know if they'll be that bad this weekend against the Mammoth, but I'm going with Colorado on that one. And like I said, Melissa picked the same as me, so those are her picks too. Tyler, what do you think?
I think poor New England is going against a Calgary team that is desperate for wins, and they will hopefully not annihilate them, but they will be at home. New England's on the road and not going to win that game. So congratulations to the Roughnecks on getting their 3rd win, presumably. Toronto at Edmonton. And you both pick Edmonton. Edmonton looks really great. But these 2 teams played a few weeks ago, and Toronto won the game. And I don't see any difference in the team since then, except that now Toronto's going to be at home, where they should have an even slightly more comfortable player experience and be even more ready. So I have Toronto winning that game again. And I don't know if it'll be the last time they play, but it would be 2-0 in the season series, if not sweeping the season series. Minnesota at Buffalo. This is completely dependent upon health, and a depleted Minnesota roster has no chance. But every once in a while, Minnesota comes out and beats a really good team, and every once in a while, Buffalo comes out and is totally lackluster. And I think that's going to happen. So I pick actually Minnesota in an upset over Buffalo in this game. It just seems possible. I don't see Minnesota upsetting a Buffalo team that's having a bad game unless Minnesota also gets kind of all their pieces back together offensively with Callan Crawford, which I have no clue. There's no injury report in the NLL. But I like to think that there's a chance that they'll pull this off, so I'm picking them. Last game is Colorado at Vancouver. Stealth beat the Mammoth last time they played, and it was with like the full Stealth roster, that everything they need on defense to shut down an opposing team's offense. I don't know that they'll all be back, but I hope that they are. And if they are, I have no doubt that the Stealth can beat Colorado again. So I'm going to be optimistic and say that they'll be healthy and that they'll win the game. And even if they're not healthy, they'll have a good chance. I want to make up for that performance they put out on the floor last week. All right, those are my picks.
All right. Okay, so it should be an interesting weekend next week. I meant to look up which games I can actually watch, but I don't know about that yet. Obviously, I'd be so hopefully we'll have some interesting games next weekend. That'll do it for this episode. All of our old episodes are at addictedtolacrosse.com, which is where this one will be in half an hour or so. If you want to get hold of us, feedback at addictedtolacrosse.com will get here. We're also on Facebook, facebook.com/laxpodcast, and Twitter, of course, laxpodcast there as well. So feel free to send us your comments. And that will do it. This has been another episode of Addicted to Lacrosse. For Tyler and the absent Melissa, I'm Graham. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next week.